Well, hello everyone. My name is Tony Spicci, and I'd like to go ahead and get our workshop started. We still have some folks joining us, so we will just admit them as they come in, but I don't want to keep the rest of you guys waiting. First question I have is, can everyone hear me okay? And can everybody see the PowerPoint that is behind me? Okay, I'm getting a bunch of yeses, so that's a good sign. So again, thank you for joining us. Today we're going to talk about building your portfolio as part of the process of becoming a GISP. And this is one of the seminars that we typically do in person, but we also do it online from occasion. And based on the number of folks that signed up, I'm very glad to announce that we will probably continue to do this online. At the conclusion of this event, we will save the video and we will post it to YouTube. So I suspect that's probably going to take a few hours just because of the time it'll take to process, but it will be available. And there are a couple of videos that are already available online at YouTube as well. Just an older version of this presentation, cut into, I believe, three pieces, just a little bit shorter. And each one of those relates to a specific part of the portfolio. So if you don't know me, my name's Tony Spicci. I'm the executive director of the GIS Certification Institute, and I'm coming up on 4 years with the organization. So I feel like I've been here long enough that I'm well into the process, and things are going really well. And so really glad to see all of you here. Hopefully we have some folks that have submitted and taken their test rather, and hopefully we have some new folks, but I'm glad that you're all here. It's just me presenting. My assistant couldn't make it today, so I'm going to try to look at the chat and see if you have any questions. So as we go through the seminar, if you do have questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat. If I don't get to them right away, don't feel bashful to ask them again later. We are going to have a series of lectures, and I'm going to do some demos for you. You're more than welcome to follow along if you have your portfolio, but you don't necessarily need to do that. Again, this is designed to be an instructive video. So I'd like to start by saying congratulations. If you're attending this seminar, hopefully you are taking some of the first steps in becoming a certified geospatial professional or GISP. We run our certification to professional accreditation certification standards. And so we are a test-based and a portfolio-based certification. So that means you have to take and pass a geospatial knowledge exam, and then you have to successfully submit a portfolio. And this lecture today and these exercises are going to go over that portfolio. So we're going to tell you how to do that, how the process works, and then hopefully answer any questions that you have. And so hopefully this will get you on the way to becoming a GISP. So the very first step in this process is actually apply to become a GISP. So step one in the process is to go to our website. But before we get there, let me tell you a little bit about the GIS Certification Institute. Sorry, I'm a little out of sync on my slides. So the GIS Certification Institute, or the GISCI, is a not-profit organization that provides the GIS and geospatial community with a complete certification program that leads to the GISP, or Certified Geospatial Professional. We are based in the United States, but we have GISPs in over 59 countries and growing. So we have a small international footprint, but that footprint is growing, and we continue to expand significantly in North America. The GISCI actually started as an idea back in 1990. If you're not all that familiar with the geospatial industry, it actually started back in the 60s as a technology, but the industry itself really didn't come about until the early 2000s. So it's a relatively young industry. And there were a group of folks, primarily folks from an organization called ERISA, now called the GPN, that started asking the question about the GIS industry and what they felt was the GIS profession. And so these discussions ensued. ERISA actually did a survey of its members and found that there was overwhelming support to bring geospatial professional certification to the geospatial industry. And that's how we got our start. So now let's talk about the first step in the process, and that is getting started. So if you want to become a GISP, the first thing that you need to do is go to our website, gisci.org, and create an account. There is no cost to do this. This is a free process. And if you've already created an account and forgot the password or the username, reach out to us because our system is only set up to recognize one account. And so often people will forget their password and they create a second account just thinking that everything will merge magically, and that's never going to happen. So we ask that you have one and only one account. If you have any problems accessing it, you can send us an email at info@gisci.org, and we'd be glad to get you started. So either create an account or log back into your existing account with your credentials, and that will set you on the path to becoming a GISP. At this point, you have two options. You can start applying for the exam, or you can start working on the portfolio. We're going to talk about working on the portfolio. So once you have an account, once you're ready to get started, you're going to need to start pulling together some resources. Our portfolio is unique in that we don't tell you exactly what you need to do, but rather we say these are three broad categories and you need to have achievements in each of the three. And we give you a lot of different ways to get those achievements. And depending on what you do and what type of information you enter, you're going to need some documentation. So one of the things that we ask folks or suggest folks do when they get started is to get a transcript of college courses. If you're going to be using college education as part of your educational section, we suggest that you start working on your forms, and that includes a letter from your supervisor and an ethics statement. We found that sometimes getting your supervisor to sign off on a letter can be time consuming, so we encourage you to get that started early. And we'll tell you how to go about doing all those things. So again, first step in the portfolio process is to log in. Our system is set up to remember everything that you do. So if you do part of your portfolio one day, when you leave, everything is saved. And then when you come back, everything is there and you can continue working. Now, there's one caveat, and that is everything is saved as long as you submit it. So you do have to you do have to hit the submit button for your information to be saved in the system. When you log into the portfolio, you're going to see four sections. One is the education section, one is the experience section, one is what we call contributions to the profession, and then the fourth section are the required forms. We're going to go through each of these sections in order and explain how each one of these works and what you need to do to satisfy the point requirements in each one of those. Some tips before you begin. Everything that you do will be completed online. Any forms that you have will be uploaded and they're saved in the system. And so you do not need to mail anything in. As a matter of fact, if you mail something in, we're not going to take it because everything is done digitally and we ask you to send everything into the portfolio that way. The portfolio has point requirements, and I'll go over those here in a couple of slides. The important thing to remember is we are not looking for your entire professional history nor all of your educational information. We're just merely saying that you need to meet certain point requirements in each category. Once you meet those point requirements, you're good. We do suggest that you go over a couple points in each section just in case something that you submit doesn't work out. It'll just facilitate the process a little bit quicker if we have have something else available. But you need 150 points to submit. If you submit a portfolio with 800 points, good for you, but the reality is you're not going to get any extra credit. So we really don't want you wasting your time or effort chasing down points that you don't need. And again, we don't expect you to do an exhaustive list of things that you've done, just enough to get those 150 points and get you over the hurdle. We always recommend that folks start with the activities that will give you the highest points. And I'll talk about those in each section. But examples might be some folks might have multiple jobs, some of which they only worked at a couple months. But if you work somewhere for 5 to 10 years, chances are pretty good that's going to give you most, if not all, the experience points you need. So start there, even if it's not your most recent your most recent job. In the education section, a degree will get you more points than anything else, So we encourage you to start first with that degree and then go to the next highest earners, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Again, we don't want you to spend a lot of time on this. We just want you to meet those minimum points. And so using the activities that will give you the highest points will help you get there quickest. The portfolio can be started at any point in your career. You literally can start the portfolio the first day of your professional job. Now, obviously, you won't be able to submit it because you won't have all the points, but we encourage folks to get started early. You don't need to wait until you have everything all lined up and ready to go, but rather you can add the activities as they occur. This is a good way to help keep with your documentation and also to not have to try to remember every time and every event that you attended for your portfolio. It doesn't cost you anything to start the process. You only pay when you submit. And the important thing I should note is we don't want to reject your portfolio. So if you submit your portfolio and pay and there's something wrong, we will work with you to fix it. Now, we really encourage you to get everything done right. We don't want folks submitting portfolios that are not complete, but we're not going to take your money and leave you with nothing. So if you have any problems along the way, don't hesitate to send us an email. But if you do have a problem or we see something wrong or an inconsistency in the portfolio, we are going to contact you. We are going to give you a chance to reconcile and make it work, and we're not going to charge you extra. I've been here for 4 years. We have, and that entire time I've probably approved, I'd say at least 6,000 portfolios, either initial or recertification. We've only got two right now that have not been completely submitted, and one of those is because somebody misrepresented their work and we're waiting for them to have a chance to fix that. So we have never rejected a portfolio at this point, and we want to keep it that way. And finally, the other big tip that I would tell you is to not overthink the process. We get a lot of emails from folks, especially on the recertification side. Let's say I know I'm a little bit late. I just need a big block of time to sit down and do this. You don't need a big block of time. If you don't have a lot of extra time, just spend a half hour once a week or maybe once every other couple days and enter that information in the portfolio. Again, this is not an exhaustive resume or vitae that we're looking for. We're just looking for you to fill in the blanks, earn your points, and move forward. So we try to make it as easy as we can. You do need to make sure you get everything in there properly, but again, don't overthink the process. There's two pieces to becoming a GISP in addition to our ethics. One is the portfolio, the other is the exam. I promise you, the exam's the tougher piece of this process, so don't overthink the portfolio. One of the things that we ask you to do before you get started, please remove all sensitive and personal information from any documentation that you upload. It's not as common as it used to be, but old folks like me remember having our social security number on our college transcripts. We don't want to see that information. We don't need it. So if you have any personally identifiable information, which, in the United States could be things like a social security number or driver's license, I'm sure there's some other information amongst our international friends. You can go ahead and either redact it or just take it out of the document. We do not allow anybody to access our portfolio except existing GIS staff. But if you know anything about cybersecurity, the chances are pretty good that at some point somebody's going to probably hack into the system and gain access to the files. So again, please don't put that information in there. If we see it, we will try to redact it. But if we don't need it, then let's not put it in there. Let's try to keep our data safe and secure. So one of the questions folk have is, how many points do I need to successfully submit a portfolio? So again, you can always put more in than this, but you need a minimum of 150 points. And the way it's set up is that each applicant must earn at least 30 points in education, they must earn 60 points in professional experience, and then they must earn 8 points in contributions to profession. And again, we're going to go through each of these sections and what they mean. That only adds up to about 98. So the remaining 52 points can come from any of the three categories. So basically what we're saying is you need 150 points and you need minimums in each of these three categories. And so how you get those extra points is really up to you based on what you've done. A few minutes ago, I told you to always start with the highest point getters. And that's really true at the high level when you're looking at the total number of points needed to submit your portfolio. If you've been in the industry for 10 plus years, chances are pretty good your professional experience will get you the 60 points, probably all of those 52 points that you need for supplemental. But if you're fairly new, maybe you've only got a couple years in the industry, you might want to lean a little bit stronger in education, especially if you have a degree and some additional activities. So it's going to be different for everyone. But again, we always encourage you to kind of start with the things that will earn you the most points, just because it'll help facilitate the process and make it a little bit quicker. Our portfolio is set up that you won't be able to submit it unless you meet those point requirements in the three categories, the 150 points total, and then the two forms that we'll talk about in a little bit. So it's very, very difficult for somebody to submit a portfolio that's not complete. As a matter of fact, it's theoretically impossible. The only way you can do it is if you make a mistake, which sometimes happens. And again, if that happens, we'll help you get it fixed. So once you've entered all of the information, that's when you could submit the portfolio, and that's when you'll be prompted to pay online. You have a couple different ways you can pay. You can pay instantly right then and there when you check out with a credit card, or you can ask to receive an invoice. If you receive an invoice, you can pay by check. You can mail it in, and we give you all that information. Or if you have somebody in your purchasing department or fiscal department that has a credit card, they can either take that invoice and pay it for you, or they can always call in and talk to our certification coordinator, and they can take your payment over the phone. So we take checks, credit cards. We do not take cash. We are glad to provide, we will automatically provide you with an invoice or a receipt, depending on what action you do. And if you need a PO generated or the like, we'd be glad to help you with that as well. Just reach out to us. So again, as a reminder, once you complete the portfolio, you are not done with the process unless you've successfully passed the exam. So this is one of two pieces. And you can really start either piece first. It doesn't matter. About half of our folks will submit a portfolio first, and the other half will take the test first. It's really up to you. What I encourage folks to do is start with the portfolio right out of the gate because, again, it doesn't cost you anything to start, and you can add your activities while you're studying for the exam and hopefully have the two pieces done together so you can become a GISP. We do have a rule in that when you start the process, you have 6 years to complete it, and the the timer will basically start when you finish one of the two pieces. Now, if you need longer, which is very rare, we're glad to grant it to you. But that 6 year buffer in there is just really for us because we figure if we haven't heard from you in 6 years, you probably aren't interested in getting your GISP, and we're just gonna basically move your records to archives and stop bugging you. But if you do need longer, let us know. We'd be glad to give you that time. I've had one person so far in 4 years ask for a little bit more than 6 years, and they were granted that, and they successfully became a GISP about 2 or 3 months after the 6 years. So some of the steps that are necessary to complete your portfolio. One of our requirements is that you have to have 4 years of full-time geospatial experience. That's a very wide definition, and we'll talk about it in more detail. But it's basically anything that you do professionally. So internships, fellowships, and the like will count towards that. And again, we'll talk about that a little more in the experience section. You do have to get your portfolio formally approved. So simply submitting it will not satisfy that requirement. We do go through and we look at your portfolio and approve it. That process will typically take up to 30 days. We try to get through every portfolio in about 2 weeks, but sometimes schedules don't allow. So we tell folks 30 days. It's usually sooner. You will have to take and pass the GISCI Geospatial Core Knowledge Exam, and then you'll have to submit a ethics statement. So the ethics statement is very important to our profession, and it's very important to our certification. Ethics is the backbone of any real profession. It doesn't really matter what you do, whether it's engineering, surveying, or any of the other trades. You have to agree to abide by a code of ethics. And we have our own special geospatial code of ethics. That code of ethics was written by a group of folks at ERISA with input from a lot of different other folks. It is the backbone of our certification. And so, in order to be a GISP, you have to agree to abide by that Geospatial Code of Ethics. If you fail to do so, you can lose your certification. And so, our ethics is posted to the website. And when we talk about forms, we'll talk about how we upload that ethics statement. Now, I told you that you need 4 years of experience. That is true, but you can start the GISP at process at any point in your career. You just have to meet all the requirements to get the GISP. We do have folks that come right out of college and take the exam and pass. Their rationale is they want to take it before they forget stuff. We have other folks that do that and bomb the exam. We're getting a lot of folks that got their certification years ago, let it expire, and they're coming back. And so for those folks, the portfolio is an easy piece because they've already completed that, but now they have to take the exam or retake the exam. And a lot of those folks tend to do very well. Everybody's different. I can't tell you what the magic formula is for you. That's something for you to find. But I will tell you that we try to make it as easy as we can. Try to provide as many resources as we can, and we will also point you to other resources to help you in the process. So, what we're going to do next is we're going to talk about education, then we'll talk about experience, then we'll talk about contributions to the profession, we'll go to forms, and then we'll wrap it up. So, quick reminder, we've already talked about this. You need to take the exam, and when you're working on this process, remember, there's no point in trying to get 5, 6, 7, 800 points. You just need to get the minimums and then you'll be good to go. So before you get started with education, we encourage folks to start getting you need two pieces of information at a minimum for your documentation. One is if you're going to claim any type of college experience, you need some form of transcript. And you're also going to need a letter from your employer, and that's in the education experience, or I'm sorry, the experience section. These are the two things that sometimes can take the longest. As it relates to your college transcript, we don't care what it is. It could be a diploma, if you're just claiming the actual degree itself, or if you're doing classwork, you can use an unofficial transcript, an official transcript, whatever is easiest for you to get. We don't really want you to have to, spend a lot of money on an official transcript or anything else. Remember, you're going to upload it. So you need something that could either be scanned or in something that's in a digital format. Whenever you're submitting the portfolio, you can document everything if you choose to do so. But because a lot of activities will only earn you a point or two, anything that's 2 points or less does not need documentation. And so we'll kind of go over the point totals here in a little bit. You don't need documentation for everything, but you're going to need it for the big items, and we'll talk about those as we go forward. So in the education section, you need a minimum of 30 points. Anything above this will go towards your supplemental points. And so as we start moving through these slides, you're going to start seeing the portfolio. Now I will I will tell you that we're changing. You might see some nuances and some changing in some of the verbiage. We are updating the language in this a little bit, but essentially this portfolio is going to be the same for the foreseeable future. So if you're following along and you see some different verbiage, again, don't be alarmed. Within the education section, there are 4 different areas. Credential degrees, or so basically any type of academic degree, any type of accredited coursework. So that's educational opportunities you take typically at a college or university, non-accredited course points. And so that's going to be courses outside of the university, and then conferences and webinars. And so again, we'll talk about each one of these. But just real quick, looking at the interface, when you log in, you should see your name or your login name. You'll be in the dashboard. And then across this bar right here in the top, you'll see primary info. Then here's where you see your education section, experience, contributions, and then required forms. So the 4 areas that we're going to talk about. And so now we're in education, and you can see these 4 drop-down categories. Every time you choose something, the application's automatically going to adapt itself for the category. And so you'll see things change as you move around. So the first section are in our education point schedule are credential degree points. And so this is any type of points that you've earned through successful completion of a formal degree. It can be anything from an associate's degree all the way through to a PhD, or it could be a GIS certificate that you've earned from an accredited educational institute. Now, the important thing to remember here is that you can only claim credit for one of these. And so I'm going to use myself as an example throughout this entire process. I got a bachelor's degree and I got a master's degree. So I can only list the master's degree and get credit for it. I can add the bachelor's degree, but the system's not going to add the points. Now, where this is important is that I will get credit for my master's degree, but when we get to the next section, which is accredited coursework, I can get credit for the classes that I took in both degrees. So you can get credit for undergraduate coursework if you have an advanced degree, but you're only going to get the base points for that degree. So that's only one degree. And when we look at our schedule, anything above a master's and above is 25 points. So 25 out of your 30 points can be knocked out simply by having a master's degree or a PhD. A bachelor's is worth 20, an associate's degree is worth 10, and then the GIS certificate's worth 5 points. You you only need to enter the highest one. If you enter the other one, that's great, but it's not going to get you the points. But right out of the gate, you'll get points for that. Now, this is something that's very important. As an organization and as a certification, we value education. So any degree that you earn, as long as it comes from an accredited university, will earn you points. If you have a degree in English or literature or a romance language or theology, you will get credit for that degree according to that point schedule. Now, that's a little different when we get to the college courses. We'll talk about that next. But any degree will earn you points. So now when we move to our next section, which is accredited course points, these are any of the classes that you've taken from an accredited university or institution that have some type of relationship to the geospatial industry. And so if you have any doubt, we encourage you to look at the geospatial body of knowledge. You can find that link on our website. If it falls within the geospatial body of knowledge, it counts. But just to kind of summarize here, anything related to GIS, cartography, remote sensing, field methods, um, advanced math, statistics, anything that really revolves around the geospatial industry will count. So it's very broad. Now, earlier I told you you can only get credit for one degree. So let's say you have a bachelor's degree and you got a GIS certificate. You can claim credit for the coursework for both of those, again, assuming it meets the criteria of being geospatially related. And so a lot of folks will sometimes get their bachelor's degree and then they go back and get a GIS certificate from a different university. And you won't get the 5 points, but you'll get even more points for those classes. And so what we do in this section, it's a little tricky, but hopefully this will make sense when I explain it to you. And a lot of folks will miss this, so this is important to pay attention. In our education section, you need a total of 30 points. 40 hours equals 1 point. So basically, you need 1,200 hours of education to get those 30 points. You can get them any way you want. Anything from a conference all the way up to that college degree. Obviously, the degree is going to get you the most points the quickest. But what we're looking at is the amount of time that you are spending in that educational setting. And so in the case of a college course, if you took like a cartography course at a traditional university that has a semester-based system, most universities are going to be either 3 credit hours or some might be 4. And it really depends on how many hours you were spending in the classroom, and that's how the university decides how many points you're going to get, right? So a lot of times, like a 4 credit class was usually 4 hours a week, whereas a 3 credit class was 3 hours. Just depends on the school you went to. We look at it this way. If you're going and if you're taking a 3 credit course, you're going to be in lecture for 40 hours. There's your first point. But you're going to have assignments, you're going to have independent study, you're going to have outside work, classwork. And so rather than trying to ask you how many hours you spent in each one of these classes, which for me was like 30 plus years ago, we basically tell you for a traditional 3 credit class, give yourself 120 student activity hours. If you are in a trimester system or a quad-based system, we ask you to kind of use that formula and modify it. So basically, however many classroom hours you take, multiply that by 3, and that's the number of total student activity hours that we encourage you to put down. So again, any coursework that's falls in that geospatial body of knowledge is going to count. And so you can see some examples here. If you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat because I know this part's a little confusing. I'm going to answer a couple of these questions real quick, and then I'll get to the next slide. So there's a question about the exam. The exam is offered in testing centers through Pearson VUE, and we do have it's about 8,800 testing centers across the globe. So chances are very good that there will be a testing center somewhere in Central Asia. Granted, that's a very, very large area, but you can go to our website and we do have a link to Pearson VUE that will show you those active test centers. So I can always look later if you give me a more specific location. Another question we had is, are there no additional points if you have a bachelor's and a graduate certificate? So the answer is yes. You'd only get credit for the bachelor's, but you'd be able to claim the coursework for the graduate certificate. So let's say your graduate certificate said you had to take 6 classes. Maybe 2 of them are related to some field, right? So maybe it's I know at University of Missouri where I got my master's degree, their GIS certificate was 4 classes, 2 of which were like electives. So if I was a forester, they might be forestry classes. Those won't count. But if I had 4 classes that were all geospatial, I would get 3 points for each. So I wouldn't get the 5 points for the certificate because I'm already claiming my bachelor's, but I would have 12 points for the 4 classes that I took. And then if I add the 20 points for my bachelor's, I now have 32, and I have enough points to meet the educational requirement. Next question is, are accredited course points in addition to one's degree or the courses you have taken within your degree? Yes, these are in addition to. So in a roundabout way, you're double dipping, right? You're getting credit twice for one activity, and that's okay. And so earlier I told you that if you don't have a lot of experience, it might be a little bit tougher to get supplemental points for experience. This is where you can make up a lot of points towards those supplemental points, especially if you have like an advanced degree, because you can claim coursework for both universities or basically both degree programs. So yes, you can count a degree and you can count the courses for that degree or that certificate. Another question was, how long after passing the test does one have to complete the portfolio? The answer is 6 years. So that is more than enough experience that gives you more than enough time to get the 4 years of professional experience. And I am going to talk about experience next. Freelance work does count, and we'll talk about that in education. So the third of the 4 categories is non-accredited course points. And really what this is one of the titles that we've changed to be maybe a little less confusing. This is basically anything that you do that doesn't take place at a university. So this could be software training. In the old days, we used to go to Esri for 5 days to learn how to do new software modules. Today, most of it's done online, but it could be software specific training. It could be really anything that's related to the geospatial part of your program and your profession. So for me, somebody that, when I started out a long time ago, I did a lot of hands-on work. I did command line arc info. So that's how I got my start. But as I moved my way through the ranks, I used to work for the state of Missouri. I took on more leadership roles and I became basically a program manager and a project supervisor. And so it didn't allow me to use the software quite as much as I used to, but I still had to take a fair amount of training to help me be proficient in my job. And so down the line, when you're going to recertify, things like process management, those types of training, those will count as well because they are a part of what you do professionally. So it is a pretty wide window. If you're just starting out in the industry, again, typically it's going to be software related or the like, but there is a wide window of training that counts. One thing to keep in mind at any point in this portfolio process, in person versus virtual is the same. If you attend anything virtually, you get the same point totals and you treat it the same way as being there in person. COVID really put a lot of things into the virtual world, and so we accept that just the same. And just like the academic coursework, your points are awarded based on the total time that's spent online or in the instructor-led environment. So if you took 5 days of training, 40 hours a total, that would earn you 1 full point. And the last of the four categories is conference or webinar attendance. And so this is kind of that catch-all. If you attend a conference, if you go to the Esri conference, or if you go to FOS4G or the GPN GIS Pro conference, you can earn points for that as well. And so basically, it's based on your participation, how many days are spent, how many hours are spent either in the conference or webinar, and that will earn you points. So the way we enter this information, I'm going to show you a couple slides, and then we're going to jump into an online demo. Everything is done online in the portfolio, and as you select certain actions, certain things will happen. So when you go to add your degree, you're going to click on the add degree button, and then it's going to ask you what degree did you earn, when did you earn it, where, ask you some notes. And then this is where our documentation comes into place. So remember, I told you how to upload either a diploma or an official or a transcript, an official or unofficial. You would do that here. And so you'd choose the file, you'd upload it, and that information is then saved into the system. Um, so the big piece of documentation here is going to be for your degree. And it just has to be original. It could be official. It could be unofficial. It could be a copy. We just need to see something. When we start talking about coursework, again, so now we're on the accredited institution, very similar process. And it's going to ask you hours in classroom. This is what we talked about earlier. You'd put 120 hours. Now, one important thing is let's say you just have one degree and you enter the transcript as part of the degree. You don't need to keep uploading the same file for each one of your classes. We'll know to go back and look at that. Now, if you're claiming coursework from a non-degree, so like a GIS certificate, make sure you put the unofficial transcript here. And again, you just need to do it once and you'll be good to go. We talked about that already. We talked about this. And then finally, conferences and workshop. It's a very similar process, except here you actually have the option to enter days or hours. Now, when you upload documentation, you can either choose a file or you can choose a link. So if you have a link to some your documentation, you can just put the link in there, and that will be good to go. So, again, conference attendance is based on the total number of hours or days that you've spent at the meeting. And then webinars, if you claim a webinar, is the total number of hours spent in the actual webinar itself. All the point totals really count the same. It's just hour by hour. So you can double count points. If you attend a conference, you can get educational points. If you present at that same conference, then you can claim that in contributions. And we'll talk about contributions here in a little bit. Okay, so let's do a quick demo. I'm going to skip the documentation because I'm just going to show you that documentation in the demo. And hopefully this will go very smoothly. So hopefully everyone is seeing my my portfolio. So this is my test portfolio. This is you're not actually going to see me. Um, Hold on a second because I can't. There we go. So is everybody? Oh, I'm gonna have to log back in. Okay. Hopefully everyone can see the portfolio. I'm not seeing my chat, so let me see. Nobody said they can't see it. Okay. So when I'm ready to work on my portfolio, there's a couple different places you can go. So I've logged into my account, and you can anywhere you want, just click on go to portfolio, and then it's going to take you to the portfolio. Now, I want to point out a couple things. Instructions for new certification, so new folks, hopefully all of you, and then we have instructions for folks that are recertifying. It's the same portfolio for both. It just changes based on what you're doing, and the system's smart enough to know. We have a lot of instructions. Don't be afraid to read them. A lot of folks don't. And we'll get an occasional email where somebody says, "Well, I didn't understand how to do this," and it's like it's right here, guys. So don't hesitate to read. When you sign into your portfolio, you're probably going to see a start the application button right here. I already have, which is why I don't see it. But you would click here, and then that will bring you into your application. If you haven't taken the exam, here's where you can sign up for it. So if I click on my application tab, now I'm seeing that bar that we talked about. So there's primary info. There's my education, experience, contributions, and required forms. So let's do a demo for education. You can see the four drop downs: degree, academic coursework, non-academic, and conferences and webinars. So oops, if I want to enter my degree, basically all I need to do is add degree. It's going to ask me what I earned. So master's, the year, which was a long time ago, 92. Now, if it's already in here, it will autofill. But I'm just going to put in Mizzou, University of Missouri Columbia, and notes. We don't need a lot of additional information, so I got a Master of Arts in Geography. And then for my documentation, I come here, I browse, and I have my unofficial transcript. I click save, and now it's in here. And so, one thing to kind of keep in mind as you work through this, especially once you become a GISP, anytime you save your portfolio, it'll put all the information in the history tab. Now I'm blank because this account hasn't become a GISP yet, but that is where I would find that information. And so you can see that I've added this, and I have 25 possible points. Now, if I go up, one of the ways you know how many points you have is if you go to the point calculator. And so when you look at the point calculator, you can see it breaks it down. And even though I've got 2 degrees listed, I'm only getting 25 points for one of them under the degree section. Now I've got some additional information that gets me over the hump. So you can see the points, the goal, and then met. Thumbs up means I've met that goal and I'm good to go there. Real quick, just adding academic coursework, very similar process. Where did you get the degree or the course? What year? Course name. So we'll just say, well, I'm just making some stuff up. Geography 5600. Cartography 120. I don't need any more academic or any more documentation because I already have it. I click save, and now we can see the course right there in the 3 points. So it automatically adds that information. So let's switch back to our slides, and I will answer a couple questions, and then we will move to the next section. Okay, I will work to on the scrolling. So Frank wants to know, what do you recommend personally to complete first? The exam or the portfolio? I would encourage you to start the portfolio as soon as you're ready. and start working on the exam. We do another presentation on the exam, which we go into a little bit more detail. But the exam, it's very difficult to assess, for us to assess how ready you are for the exam. So we have self-assessment tools for you. And so what we encourage folks to do is to use some of those self-assessment tools, such as the practice exams, and just get a sense of where you are. And when you're ready to take the exam, take the exam. Some folks can take it with very little preparation. Um, some folks need a lot of preparation for the exam. And so we do have some of those resources. And I'd be glad to steer you towards those at the end of the presentation. Um, so Rebecca, to answer your question about documentation, anything that indicates that you were at the event. So it could be a copy of a receipt, it could be a program if you were in the conference, or a listing, or if there's a like a website that lists who attended. Yeah, anything that points us in the direction is perfectly fine for documentation. And then last question, if we already have points for a degree, do you have to list all the courses? No, you do not have to list the courses. You can list the courses though for points if you choose to do so. But no, you do not have to list all the courses. Okay, next section is the experience section. So this one's a little bit more straightforward. Um, GISPs need a total of 4 years of professional experience. So that's 4 years equivalent. So if you started out as a grad student and you were doing like a teaching assistantship or had a research assistantship, as long as it's geospatially related, that will count towards your 4 years of experience. And so if you work part-time for 2 years, that's the equivalent of 1 full year of experience. So we're looking at 48 not 4 years, 4 full-time years, so FTE equivalent of experience. So you can stretch it out. You don't actually have to work full time for the 4 years. You can work part time as long as it adds up to for 4 years or 48 months. And you will need to get 60 points to satisfy this component. The only documentation that you need for this is that signed letter from your immediate supervisor, or if you are self-employed, you can get a similar letter from anybody that you've contracted with. And basically, it just says, yeah, I can attest that this person works and does this job. I can't attest for everything in their portfolio, but I will attest that they do the job. And so that's our required documentation. The experience section is a two-part section. One is the employer, and then the other is the experience. And this is what people sometimes trip up on. You have to tell us who you work for, and then you have to tell us what you did. And so when we look at that experience portfolio, and now you're looking at me, not my sample account. You could see here employer, and then oops, and then over here the actual experience associated with the employer. And so I've only had two professional jobs in my career. And so the way I would add that is add employer. That creates a new instance of the employer. Then it's going to ask me a bunch of information and two very important notes. And I'll show this to you in the demo, but this is very important. Our system right now is not set up to constantly, if you put a start date and an end date, it will automatically calculate the points. However, if you are currently employed, you leave this blank and it will calculate the points until your last date of the actual date of submission. It will not automatically recalculate the points in the background. So you need to go back and update that record. So if you started your portfolio a year ago and you needed a couple more experience points, you log in today, you don't see them. It's because it didn't update. And I'll show you how to update the record. We're working, our next version of the portfolio will hopefully fix this, but for now, I wanted to make sure you guys knew that. And so you fill out the forms, hit save, and it's entered into the record. The next piece is to add experience. And so you click add experience, it's associated with the employer. It'll ask you a level, we'll talk about in the next slide, duties, percentage of your job, and notes. We don't need a lot of information here for notes. Really, in this section, you only need to add notes if there's something that we need to know about, something that we might not understand in looking. And same thing with duties. Be very brief. We don't need an exhaustive list. We have currently three levels of employment. And what you need to do is kind of put yourself in one of these categories. So tier one is analyst, system design programming. So kind of high-end GIS user. Tier two is a mid-tier GIS user. And then tier three is an entry-level GIS user. This is kind of a brief summary. We do have a document I'll tell you about here in a minute that goes into a little bit more detail. But what we tell folks to do is we don't we don't need to you don't need to split your jobs out line by line. So if your primary role in the organization is to do database management, so you do that like maybe 75% of your time, but you do spend some time creating maps and creating reports, then I would tell you to put everything into tier one. So really, it's take the highest level of work that you do and put yourself in that tier, knowing that you are going to do some of the things in other tiers. So for instance, when I first started with the Department of Conservation, I was a GIS specialist. I had to do everything, right? So I had to do I had to basically utilize the apps. I had to create data, edit data. I made maps. I made reports. I did database maintenance. I did data validation. I taught. I also did database design. I did all the documentation. I did all the things. And so it would be appropriate for tier one because again, if that's your primary role, you're going to have to do a lot of these other things as well. So don't spend a lot of time here trying to break your job out. I've had folks submit like 6 or 7 different lines and basically detail what they do. We don't need that granularity. So you saw the question about percentage of time. So again, we're looking for 4 years of full-time equivalent experience. So if you worked part-time, you would put in like 50%, right? So zero point 0.5 for the amount of time that you spent doing that job. Or if you want to split your job out like this, zero point 0.7, zero point 0.3, that's fine too. But again, I would encourage you not to overthink this step and try to put yourself in multiple categories. This is really like if you were like a educator, so you were a TA for a GIS class for 2 years, you'd put in start date and end date of 2 years, and then you put zero point 0.5 if you work part-time or half-time, 20 hours a week doing that. And so here's just another example here where this person was only working 40% of the week. So zero point 0.4, they were grad students. So you'd put zero point 0.2 and zero point 0.2 in each category. And that'll automatically calculate that for you. So in the system, again, you have an employer and then you have an activity. So every employer is going to have its own entry. You're only claiming jobs that have geospatial activities associated with them. So I told you I only had 2 jobs. Well, I really had 3. I worked in a restaurant as a chef. That's not going to count because that is not geospatially related. So it's really just the primary jobs. And again, you don't have to list everything, right? So start with the jobs that you've worked at the longest. And once you have enough experience points and supplemental points, you can go ahead and stop and not have to add the additional ones. We do have an experience chart that we list on the website. This is what it looks like. We're cleaning this up. This is pretty extensive. But if you're kind of debating where you fall in the different tiers, um, go ahead and use this chart to help find where you are. And again, if the majority of your work kind of centers around geospatial analysis, systems design, put yourself in tier one, and you'll be good to go. There's a bonus that you can earn if you supervise staff. So the supervisory bonus is in addition to your job, unless it's all that you do. So about a year or two after I started working for the Department of Conservation, I hired my own replacement because I got promoted. And then I started adding more and more people. So in addition to doing the work, I was also supervising folks. And so this is a bonus. This will give you additional point. Um, and the way we do this is basically on top of the existing job. So you're adding an additional job. And the way we do this is you will complete a second instance of the employer, the time period for your supervising, and then list the supervisory tier itself. So again, this is going to be in addition to the work that you do, and it just focuses on those additional responsibilities. And then the final piece here, and this is what we'll talk about in forms, is you do have to have that letter from your immediate supervisor. Most supervisors will turn this around fairly quickly. Not all do. So if you think your supervisor may be a little slow in responding, that's why we encourage you to start that process a little bit earlier. And so I'll show you this a little bit later. We have a blank form that they can use, or they can write their own letter. But basically, we're just looking for a supervisor to send a letter on company overhead and sign it and say, hey, I can attest that this gentleman or this young lady works in the role that they work in. All right. So now let's do a demo, and hopefully everybody can see this time. Okay, so now I'm going to come over to my experience tab. And you can see I've actually got a bunch of different employment here already. And the reason why is I kind of wanted to show you how this would work. So in the case of Missouri Department of Conservation, this was my primary job. And you could see, remember I told you, like, if you work somewhere a long time, I got 430 points for working there. Had I been submitting now, I became a GISP in 2012, so I didn't get this many points. But this is the instance of my job. And then for my supervisory bonus, I added another instance of Department of Conservation, MDC. Same title, same employer, time span, location, duty supervisor. And then here's my supervisory bonus. So it's much smaller. It accrues less points, but it still adds up. And so if I were to add a new employer, I would first click on Add Employer, and we do GISCI. We're in Des Plaines, Illinois. Title, Exec Director, start date. So let's say I started here. I leave this blank. And then general description, again, be very brief. And I am good to go for employer. So now I have this, but you'll notice there's no points. So now I have to come in here and add experience. This is a level 3. My employee XYZ percent. So I do work 100% of the time, not 1,000. And once I hit save, it will add that, and you'll see very little points. Now, I told you earlier that this employer with the date to present, the way you would go about updating the record is simply just go to the experience, click edit, and hit save, and it should automatically refresh the points each time you visit the portfolio. So I already have enough points, so I don't have to worry about that. But if you're one of the folks that has 2 or 3 years of experience and you don't have enough points, then you'll want to come back here and refresh it. And again, if you ever have any problems or issues, just send us an email and we'd be glad to walk you through that process. So before I go to contributions, I am going to answer a couple of the questions, and I'll just go for the bottom. Can I submit my portfolio before reaching 4 years of experience? The answer to that question is technically yes, but you won't become a GISP until you hit that 4 year experience mark. So we will note that in your record, and then we will push it through if you're short. So it's either way you want to do it. If you submit early, we'll hold on to the record because if you're if you are a tier one user, you'll have 75 points after 3 years. So you'll meet the point requirement, but you do have to wait the 4 years. Um, Question above it, GIS coordinator and sysadmin for the GIS environment with some database design and management. Most time is spent doing more mid-level work. I would put yourself in tier one because if you're doing sysadmin work and database design, then you'd qualify as tier one. Um, Dallas asked if jobs can fit in multiple tiers. Absolutely. When the system was set up about 20 plus years ago, a lot of folks at the time, GIS was still a novelty for many organizations. And so we had a lot of folks, my organization might be a good example where we had forest ecologist was a forest ecologist that did all the GIS work for the forestry department. So half their time was forest ecology and half was GIS. And so that's where that split comes in. So like if you're working 50% of your job doing GIS, you'd put 0.5 or 50%. That doesn't happen as much, which is why we encourage folks to not overthink it and try to put themselves in 3 or 4 tiers. But if you definitely have very different job responsibilities, then yes, you can split them up. Okay, let's move on to the contributions to the profession. Um, Two questions came in real quick. A couple questions come in. So oh, as a reminder, you only need a supervisor level letter for your most current supervisor. So if you have 3 employers, only one letter. So you can go ahead and list your previous employers, even if you have no way of contacting them. That's one of the reasons why we only require one letter, because it could be troublesome or burdensome for you to do that. So again, if you have 3, 4, 5 jobs, we only need the most current. If that is an issue, let us know, because sometimes there are situations where, like, if, let's say, for instance, you started your job last week, your new boss might be like, I don't know if I feel comfortable. Now, keep in mind, the supervisor is just attesting that you work there. They're not saying, yeah, this person's a great GIS person. But if they don't feel comfortable, then you can use a previous employer. Or if you're in a situation where you're having some issues with your employer, you can again use a previous employer, but you got to let us know. We won't understand why you have an older letter. So just reach out to us and let us know. If you are a freelancer or you own your own company, then ask one of your clients to send a letter just basically stating, yes, I can attest that this person is who, they own this company and they are providing professional services for us. You do need to make points in all 3 sections. You cannot get 150 points in education and be done. There are point minimums in every section. And this next section that we're going to move into is the one where folks have the most problems. So there's a couple questions about, hey, should I start my portfolio or the exam first? One of the reasons why we encourage folks to start the portfolio early is if you don't have the points, it gives you a head start on getting the points. All GISPs must earn 8 points in the contributions to the profession section. It's a requirement. You have to do it. Anything above the 8 points can be used for your supplemental points. The idea behind contributions to the profession. This is a way our profession's young. So in addition to the profession benefiting the applicant needs to basically be benefiting the profession. So, in order for our profession to move forward, we have to give back. It would not exist in the form that it is if folks weren't doing things like volunteering to run a GIS day or to run a GIS conference or volunteering to do mapping work in a disaster or being part of a geospatial organization such as ERISA/GPN or the Young Professional Networks. None of this happens without people that aren't willing to dedicate a portion of their time and effort. And that's what contributions to the profession are. And we believe that everybody can easily earn a minimum of 2 points per year, which is why we have 8, because you need 4 years of experience. So 2 times 4 is 8. So that's where we came up with 8 points. There are 8 different categories of contributions to the profession. Now, I will tell you right now, this is one of the areas that we're updating right now in our portfolio. Um, we are making this much more contemporary. So some of the things that you're going to see here aren't really applicable in today's world. They were, 10, 20 years ago. So we are updating, but it's not going to be significantly different. It's just going to be refreshed, is probably the best way of putting it. Oops. So, um, 8 categories, and we'll go over each one in a little bit more detail. But from the top, publications, um, association involvement, conference participation, workshops, conference presentation, GIS awards, GIS volunteer efforts, and then the catch-all, um, other contributions, which we'll talk about. And so to answer Madeline's question, yes, the GPN's mentoring network would count towards contributions, and depending on what you're doing, it can count in a couple different ways. And so let's go over each one of these, and I'll come back to the questions. Again, points should be included for each instance that the applicant has satisfied the list of contributions. So there's 8 categories. You don't need to get points in each of the 8. All could be in one, or you can spread it across different categories. You can use the same category multiple times. So one of the easiest ways to get a point is to present at a conference, poster or presentation. Um, Easy for most people, maybe intimidating for some, but it's a good opportunity for you to get out there. And so you can go to a conference and present and get a point. You present 8 times, 8 different conferences or 8 different presentations, 8 points, you're done. So you don't have to do just one thing. You can do one thing over and over again, or you can do a variety of things. Excuse me, again, you don't have to go in all 8 categories. And one of the most important things to remember is that you can do these things multiple times over multiple years. So if you join a professional organization such as the GPN and you've been a member for 5 years, you will get credit for all 5 years. The other very, very important thing, and I think I have a slide, but I'll say it now, and if I need to, I'll say it again. Contributions are your way of giving back to the profession. They don't have to be strictly volunteer. So if you work for, like when I worked for the Department of Conservation, I was a member of a number of organizations, including NSGIC, National State Geographic Information Council. They paid my dues. I still got credit for being a member of NSGIC, even though they paid my dues. If I went and presented at a conference, I got credit because I presented at a conference, even though my employer paid for it. So it doesn't have to be completely independent of your employer. You can do things as a condition, in addition to your employment, that your employer pays for it, or you use employer time. The biggest thing is if you are paid to do this as your primary job, then you can't claim that as a contribution. So if you're a cartographer and your job is to make maps, then you can't claim credits for making a map. That's your experience. Now, if you make maps and then you go to a conference and talk about cartography and or you present your maps, that's different. And so we will talk about that as we go through these categories. And Michael, I will hopefully answer your question as I do this. So again, you don't have to list everything. And it can't be, and remember, so you don't have to list everything. You just have to get to those 8 points, and then anything extra is going to be counted towards your supplemental. If you've done anything that's 2 points or less, you don't need documentation for it. There's no bonus for going beyond the 8 points. And if we see anything, if there's a discrepancy or misrepresentation of points, you do run the risk of your portfolio being rejected. All we're going to do is we're going to ask you to fix that discrepancy. So if we have any questions, we will reach out to you first. And if we reject something, we'll give you a chance to make it up. Because I know sometimes this can be confusing. Okay, so this is what I was talking about earlier, and I want to just emphasize this again. Anything that's work related and required will not count towards contributions to the profession. So if you are a professor and you teach a class, that's not going to count. That is, you'll get points for experience, but you're not going to get points for presenting. And so, to Stephanie, that kind of speaks to the question that you had. Now, if you were to do a presentation away from work, then that would count towards your contribution. So, like if you went and talked to a school or you went and spoke at GIS Day or at a conference, it would count. But if you're paid to be a professor, then that's experience, that's not contribution. So really, contributions are intended to go above and beyond what you're doing at work. So the way we do this again is very similar to what we've seen in the other parts of the portfolio, where we have a drop-down menu, and then as we add things, it will automatically change the menu for us. So again, you could see here in this example. So now we'll just kind of go through real quickly. We have publications. When we see things like contributions to the profession, I'm sorry, when we want to complete each category, the category itself will kind of morph towards what we're doing. And what we're asking here is basically what you did and then a very brief description of it, right? And so in this example here, we're looking at contributions to the profession. Member of a professional organization, when did you start? When did you end? And it will automatically calculate those points. Now you'll see this little points possible box right here, line 3. Ignore that. That just tells you what the points are, but it's not what you're going to get. So again, points are automatically calculated when you end years, when you enter years. And so if you started in 2020 and you would like, so if you joined a professional organization like GPN and you've paid your dues through 2025, that would be your end date, 2025. So some people, we will see people like list each individual year. You don't need to do that. If you've been like I've been a member of NISJIC for 30 plus years, I would start date and then end date and just have one record. So I'll go through this in the demo. Contributions to the profession can and often will be above 2 points. So you do need to document anything above 2 points. And each section will have the opportunity to put in those different items. And so like when we look at publications, again, we're not looking at you to upload a book, um, but you could do things like put in the ISBN number. You can give us a link to the book itself. I know, in the old days, most of our books were, published documents that went into, different places, and now a lot of them are just available online. So just shoot us a link. Um, Same thing with like a published map. If you can give us a link to that map, that'd be great. Article, conference proceedings, etc. So don't go overboard. Um, just find examples. If you're involved with a professional association, now again, if it's only 1 point, 1 year, then you don't need to worry about documentation. But if you've been a member of an organization for multiple years, anything like a link back to the website would be great. A letter from somebody in the organization would be helpful. If you're like a board member, just send us a link to the board page. That's really, really easy to do. Um, Conference participation. So this is the one we have a lot of confusion on. Conference participation means helping run a conference. It doesn't mean going to the conference. If you go to the conference, that's going to fall under education. But conference participation means actively participating. This is one of the things that we're changing in the update. We're going to make this label a little more clear. So there's a lot of different ways that you could participate in a conference. You could be the conference chair, you could be chair of a committee, or you could be like a facilitator. So each one of those has its own points assigned to it, but GIS conference participation means you're actively helping put on that conference. Workshop instruction. Basically, if you teach a workshop and it's more than 2 points, any type of certificate, any type of acknowledgement for putting it on, again, any type of documentation that just says that you did those things is going to be sufficient. If you present at a conference, that's 1 point, so you don't need documentation. But if you do, if you do multiple presentations, again, a copy of the proceedings, a copy of the agenda, anything that where we could see your name in that conference is all you need to do. So this is something you don't need to overthink. It's just some way of saying that you were there, and proving it is all we need. If you receive an award, the ESRI SAG awards are a fairly common one for GISPs, but there's a lot of other awards out there. Most professional organizations have them. Again, if you have a copy of the certificate, that would work. A link back to the award list of awardees. I'm pretty sure that Esri will list all their SAG awards somewhere on the website. So you just give that link, and that is what you need. If you're a volunteer, a letter from the organization would be more than sufficient. Um, and then other contributions. So let's talk about contributions because I think this will make a little more sense when I show it to you. And I've already got a couple examples in here for you, um, but I'll add a couple as well as we go through this. Okay, so these are all actual. Well, no, they may not be actual. So when I'm in the contribution section, you can see I have 4 points. And as a reminder, if I come up to my points calculator, I can see I've got 4 points out of 8. So I got a thumbs down. I need 4 more. So when you click on Add Contribution, first is the category. So you choose. I'm going to use my role in MAGIC, the Mid-America GIS Consortium. So that is a GIS related professional association. I am not the board chair. I am on the steering committee. So that is one of our 2 boards. And I can't even tell you when I got elected to the steering committee. So the last time we had elections was in 2024, and my term is till 2026, but it's only 2025. So I would put Mo Rep to, and it doesn't need to be more than this, but I'm being a little brief here, just so I know. And this is really good. Like, please don't put, um, please tell me which organization you're with. I get a lot of people that don't, and I have to go back and ask them. So I'd spell it out, but Missouri Rep to Magic Steering Committee. Browse. You know what? I'm pretty sure I have a link. So if I find that link, and of course, there we go, go away. Just give me a second. I realize you probably can't see this, but Magic has a link. I can even test it, and it will pop up. There we go. There's steering committee, and I am right here. There I am. So that's how I know if I was reviewing myself, I'd see right there. There's Tony. So I hit save, and there it goes. Now notice that 2 years of being on the board gives me 8 points. And so now I have 12. I have more than enough. And you'll notice that this little blue submit button popped up. I'll talk about that a little more. But if I look at the points calculator, I've got all thumbs up. I'm now ready to submit. So that's kind of how you know. People are like, what happens if I accidentally submit and I don't have enough points? You can't accidentally submit without having enough points. You can accidentally submit without having enough accepted points. But again, you won't see that submit button until you've met all the requirements. And so again, just kind of looking at the different contributions, you can see these 8 different categories, 1 through 8. The one that we have a lot of questions on is other contributions. So GIS publications are just that. Any type of publication you do in print, online. GIS related professional association involvement. This is a very wide category. This is one of the easiest categories to earn points. Join an organization. There are a lot of national and international organizations. NISGIC, AAG, UCGIS, ASPRS, and ERISA/GPN all serve on our board. Any of those organizations would be great organizations to join. However, that's not the exhaustive list. You'll see that I listed Magic. There's actually 2 Magics that I know of. One is in Memphis. The other, Mid-America GIS Consortium. That is an organization that I'm a part of. Doesn't cost anything to be a member. But you have to be an active member. You can't just simply put your name on a list and count that as a point. So I'm very active in Magic. I'm still somewhat active in NISGIC, National States Geographic Information Council, and I belong to a bunch of other organizations. If you're a member of a state steering committee or state coordination council, like I am, Missouri GIS Advisory Committee, that would count as well. Um, so I got points there. Conference participation. I'm actually running the next Magic Symposium, so I would get points there. Workshop instructions. I don't typically teach workshops, but some people do. Conference presentations. This is another easy way to get a point. Go to a conference, present. There are so many conferences out there. They're all looking for folks to submit abstracts. I'm sure you've got a great story and I'm sure people want to hear it. Don't ever sell yourself short on this. I know a lot of people that just don't want to present because they're too nervous or they don't think what they have to say is worthwhile. Most conferences now will allow you to present in as few as 5 to 10 minutes. Um, if for no other reason, it's great to get up and present because it tells people what you're doing and it helps you find folks that are doing similar things or have similar problems or issues, and it gives you somebody to talk to and work with. Awards, we talked about volunteer efforts. So there's two ways you can earn volunteer points. One is if you do volunteer work, the other is volunteer missions. Think of missions as big assignments. The best example I can give you for volunteer missions would be ERISA's Job Corps, or now GPNs. And this is a group of folks that, like when a natural disaster hits, they'll do GIS work typically from afar. And their deployments are measured in days, not hours. But if you're doing volunteer work, we have a lot of GISPs that will volunteer in the community. So maybe they're working for a local park, making maps, or we have folks that work with parks, schools, cemeteries, doing a lot of mapping work. Maybe you're teaching kids. Maybe you're teaching like Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts or fill in the blank organization. There's tons of great organizations. And that might be 20 hours, 40 hours, 60 hours. That'd be volunteer work. And then finally, we have this catch-all category called other contributions. And you'll see three different categories. Again, this is something that we're going to clean up and be a little more descriptive with in the next version of the portfolio. But event organizers. So think of something where you have multiple people. So like a GIS day. If you organize a GIS day, that would be an example of an event organizer. Let's say you just go and present at GIS day, or you're presenting at one of your children's classes or a neighbor's social group. Then that would be event participation or moderation. So you're basically going out and presenting. Um, so that hopefully covers everything. But if you have questions, we'd always be glad to answer them. So I'm going to answer the questions, and then we got a little bit more to go, and then we'll wrap up. Um, so for professional associations, the website says membership in any professional organization, as well as student memberships will qualify. That's correct. They do have to be GIS focused. So what does that mean? If GIS focus means that GIS is a part of what they do. So if you're a member, well, I'm an ELK, which is a charitable organization, that doesn't count. GIS, nothing to do. I don't even think most of the folks in my lodge know what GIS is. I know they don't because I tell them what I do and they give me a blank stare. That doesn't count. Rotary doesn't count. But we have a lot of folks that have multiple certifications, like so the Association of Floodplain Managers. Now, obviously, if you read the label, floodplain managers, their primary role is probably not GIS, but they are GIS people in that professional organization. That counts. We have AICPs, professional planners, that are members of APA. That counts. So if it's part of what you do professionally and it has a GIS component, then it absolutely counts. Again, we don't want to split hairs here. We'll give you the benefit of the doubt, but if it clearly has no relationship to GIS, then it doesn't count as an organization. So it sounds to me like Linda, your organization would count. Um, Kyle has a question about recertification. Um, Kyle has a complex. Okay, knowledge the blue ad experience, ad education. But no. So Kyle's asking why he doesn't see his buttons for adding information. Kyle, if I had a bet, you have to, on the primary screen, you have to hit Start Application. Um, so try that, and if that doesn't work or you don't see that button, let me know and we'll problem shoot. But that's my guess is you haven't, and I can't show it to you because I'm already in my application, but it would be down here at the bottom of the page. Uh, the one above it. Yes, so some of the organizations listed, GPNA, Women in GIS, these are all great organizations, as are the local groups like Maine Users Group. You guys also have the Northeast ArcInfo Users Group, is that right? I was just up there at their conference. Tons of organizations. Um, Somebody asked about writing blogs for their employer. I mean, unless your employer says you must do this, then absolutely that would count as a contribution. Esri awards count. We've talked about that. And we talked about conference participation. So I think we've covered all of those. So let's wrap it up with a couple more slides and then we will open it back up for questions. Okay, required forms. I talked about these, but let's just go. Oh, let me hit share. Let's go over this real quick. Two required forms are needed. Um, One is our ethics statement, and then the other is the employer form. So all of these forms, so two forms, we give you blank templates to download, and we've actually switched these to Word docs, making it a little bit more accessible. But download the forms, fill them out, or have them filled out. And then when you're ready, when they're filled out, all you got to do is upload the file and click save. It's that simple. So again, for the ethics letter, it's pretty straightforward. You have to agree to abide by our geospatial code of ethics. Those ethics are all listed out on our webpage. So visit the webpage, read the webpage, and if you have any questions, of course, reach out to us, but you sign the form, date the form, and upload it. And then that supervisor letter, again, that's something you want to work with your most recent supervisor. If you've just recently started a job and in your need to use your previous supervisor, that's fine as well. If you are between jobs and you can't get a supervisor letter, let us know and we'll work with you on that. And then, of course, if you are a freelancer or you own your own business, we just ask that you work with one of your clients. On the documentation, um, as long as it's signed, that's all that matters. So if you want to print out the ethics form, sign it by ink, scan it, and upload it, that's great. If you want to sign it in Word or PDF, that's fine as well. Same thing for that employer letter. We just ask that you put it on company letterhead. But we don't really care on the format as long as it's signed. That's good to go. So yes, e-signatures are absolutely perfect. And so again, you see those blank forms. Um, Two things. One is you're not going to be able to submit your portfolio without those forms. And then number two is we're rock solid on the ethics. You have to agree to abide by a code of ethics. Failure to do so means loss of your GISP. So obviously, we're not going to approve your GISP without you signing that form. Um, so real quick, let's go over costs and then we will take any questions that you might have. So I'm assuming everybody here falls under the category of initial GISP. So the initial GISP, you have to take and pass the portfolio, take and pass the exam, and you have to successfully submit the portfolio. So we talked about the portfolio, we've talked about the ethics statement and the forms. When you submit that, you pass your exam, you become a GISP for a 3-year period. So when you do all three pieces, ethics, portfolio, and exam, and once we hit approve, that's when that 3-year process starts. If you want to recertify, and we hope you do, the recertification process is a little bit simpler. As long as you stay active, you only need to sign an ethics statement again. So you're going to continue to agree by that code of ethics. And then you need to submit a portfolio, but the portfolio is much more reduced. The GISP initial portfolio is everything you've done geospatially from the day you were born to the day you hit submit. When you start the recertification cycle, now that you've earned the GISP, what we want to see you do is continue to invest in yourself and continue to invest in the profession. And so that's education and that's contributions. Believe it or not, you don't actually need to have experience to recertify. But just like the initial portfolio, you have requirements. This time it's only education and contributions, and then you still have supplemental points. So most folks will use experience for their supplemental points, but we do have a few folks that are fully retired, but they keep their GISP because it's very important to them, and they're still very active in the community, but they're not working for pay anymore. They're just volunteering, and so this maybe unintentionally was a benefit for us during COVID when a number of folks were unfortunately lost their employment. They were able to keep their GISP simply by continuing to educate themselves and be invested in the profession. So I think that's a great aspect of our program. And by the way, we're not really doing anything different than other folks. I have four other licenses and certification, and they all have very, very similar requirements. The biggest difference, though, is we really want you to be a part of the profession. And that's where the contributions piece comes in. I don't need that for my licenses or my other certification. So when you decide to become a GISP, there are some initial fees. The portfolio review fee is $200. That's paid when you submit the portfolio. So you don't pay until you hit submit. And again, if there's any issues or any problems, we're going to work with you to fix them. We really want that to be a one-time fee. When you decide to take the exam, it's the same thing. You'll pay $250 or $300 international when you sign up to take the exam. That's a one-time fee if you pass the exam. Unfortunately, if you don't pass the exam and you need to retest, you will have to pay that fee again. But that's really why we encourage you to not take the exam until you're ready. Once you become a GISP, you have to pay $95 a year to maintain it. Since you just shelled out 200 or 450 to 300 plus dollars to become a GISP, we waive the first year. So you're not assessed the $95 fee of the first year. You're just assessed in years 2 and 3. And couple things to note. One is we highly encourage you to talk to your employer. 85% of the folks that are GISPs have said their employer will pay for some or all of these fees. And then number two is that if you need to, you can spread these out. You don't have to pay for both fees at once. So that will help you if a financial issue is a problem. Once you become a GISP and you choose to recertify after 3 years, you go through that recertification process, portfolio only. And then the $95 fee sticks. If you pay 3 years at once, $285, or if you choose to pay annually, there's a slightly higher fee to cover the additional costs, and it's $110 per year billed annually. And again, recertification is 3 years. So everything we do covers a 3-year cycle. As long as you maintain your GISP, you'll never have to test again, which I know excites a lot of people. But if you let your GISP lapse, you will have to start the process from scratch. So we encourage you not to do that. And just very briefly, I'm not going to go into detail, but some points on the exam because I had a couple people ask. The exam itself is written by GISPs for the certification. It's written at a 4-year experience level. Now you can take it right out of college. Some people do, but really what we encourage you to do is take it when you're ready. So the exam itself is based on the geospatial body of knowledge. A geospatial body of knowledge has 400 plus subject areas, or what we call knowledge, skill, and ability areas. We test to 45 of those, so about 10%. And really, it's kind of the core of the profession. We publish the blueprint from where all the questions come from on our website. So basically, we're telling you these are where the questions are coming from. We just don't tell you what the questions are. We offer the exam twice a year in June and December. It can be taken at any point in your career. You don't need 4 years experience. But we encourage you to take it when you're ready. And like we said, there's a 6-year window to complete all the pieces. The exams are offered at Pearson VUE testing centers worldwide. About 8,800 testing centers is what they tell us. It consists of 100 scored questions and anywhere from 50 to 60 additional unscored questions. You don't know which are which. That's part of the accredited testing process. But basically, you're only going to be scored on those 100 scored questions. So when you take the exam, you're taking the same exam as everybody else's during that testing period. Um, but it's different from each testing period. You do not receive the results at the end of the test process. Usually takes us about 3 weeks to get all the processing done and go over all the data and make sure everything was administered correctly. Our next testing dates are June 7th through the 15th of 2025. We will close registration 2 weeks before the session starts. So the testing is open right now. You can sign up. There's a lot more to this process, and we have some presentations online at YouTube, and we'll probably do another one of these virtual seminars that focuses in on the test itself. We definitely encourage you to visit our website for more information. So I'm going to close out and then I'm going to try to work my way back and see if there's any questions. And of course, if you have any, please ask them in the chat box. Um, I became a GISP in 2012. And I joined the GISCI as an employee in 2021. One of the things that I was involved with early in that first year I was with the GISCI is one of our NISJIC liaisons wanted to do a survey of their members to see what they thought of the GISP. And Bill Johnson, who's at the time was the state GIO of New York, he later worked with AppGeo. Um, he his response kind of intrigued me when I saw the response when I saw the survey. And he actually got his GISP around the same time I did. We were very active in NISJIC at the same time. I think he was the president maybe 2 years before I became president. And so I asked him, I said, well, what are your thoughts on this process? Because I have a lot of respect for Bill. And Bill said, when it first came out, he said, I didn't really think too much of it. But he said, then I actually took the time to understand what it was and learn what it was about. And he said, the thing that struck him the most was that when he looked at the program, he realized it reinforces behaviors that help enrich the profession. And that's why he chose to be a GISP. And I think that's one of the best reasons I could provide you towards why you should become a GISP, because it does elevate not only yourself, but it also elevates the profession. And so this is an investment in yourself. Keep that in mind when you do this, and always have an open heart and open mind to this process. So with that, if you have any additional questions, please ask them in the chat. I want to thank everyone for taking the time to be here. It was a great session. We are going to put it up on YouTube, hopefully in the next day or two. Just takes however long it takes to get it up there, but I'll work on it this evening once the seminar is done. Um, there's some questions about the pre-GISP. So we are launching the GISP program this fall, or this spring rather. We have opened up the testing process. So the pre-GISP is designed to be an entry-level credential for young professionals. It has a very strict set of requirements. It is not designed as a replacement for the GISP, but rather it's designed as the first piece of a GISP. So a GISPE candidate is only available to folks that are recent graduates from college and who are just entering the professional workforce. It's not open to folks that have been in the workforce for any amount of time. It is a test-based certification, and if an individual passes that test, they become a GISPE or an emerging geospatial professional, and they are allowed to take the GISP exam, submit the portfolio, and become a GISP after 3 years instead of 4. And so really what this program is designed to do is to kind of be the first step towards building a program that's similar to the surveyor in training or the engineer in training programs for apprenticeships for surveyors and engineers. Now, there's a lot more pieces to this that we're going to build out, but this is that first step. And so if you know of any young students that are interested, definitely have them check out our website on that. We talked about e-signatures. Um, Bradley, I don't see your original question. Oh, I've written a few blogs for my employer that they published on their website. Does that count? Yeah, so that would be, um, assuming it's not part of your normal job duties, yeah, that would count as a publication, is where you want to put that. I believe there's a category for newsletters. Are there any other questions that I didn't answer? We talked about SAG awards counting. Talked about somebody asked about recording a presentation to a GIS class. That would fall in that last category, where we talked about, I believe it's related. It's the very last category in that contribution section. So um, it'd be category 8, other GIS contributions. And under that, category 8 is event participation slash moderation. Jordan, if you're still here, I had a question about supervising independent research students in a fellowship. That would count towards supervisory points. Yes. We talked about freelancing. Oh, we have a new question. Considering starting a blog with each review entry. Yeah, I mean, this is kind of where good judgment kind of takes place. So if you're writing a new article each time, then yes, I would argue that each one of those would count like under category H, GIS publication, newsletter, article, or review. Um, Now, when you say would each review slash entry, now if I'm not sure what you mean by review, so if you write an article, that would count as a point. If you're like reviewing somebody else's blog, then I would say no. But yeah, if you had like 5, 10 blog posts, that would each one would count if it's a separate post. Mohammed said 30 published articles in peer-reviewed journals. How can I add that? So that would be GIS publications, and it would be item B, which is refereed paper author. And so that's 5 points. So you can add all 30, but you wouldn't need that many. You'd get more than enough points with a couple of those at 5 points each. And for start year, end year, it's always the same year. Again, that's one of the things that we'll fix in the next reversion of the portfolio. So, whatever year it was published would be the start and the end year. And you can either upload the document, the peer-reviewed document itself, or if you have a link to it, that'd be even better. So, any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you everyone for your time. We really appreciate you being here. My last slide does have my contact information, so I'll leave it up for another second. If you want to reach out, we're always glad to answer any questions to help you along the way. We look forward to welcoming all of you as a new GISP, or I know